The desert was quiet except for the soft whistle of the wind. Dust swirled around broken walls and rusted metal, the remains of a town that had been alive once. Now, it was nothing more than a graveyard under the hot, unforgiving sun. A lone figure walked through the ruins, a human warrior. His armor was scratched and dented, each mark telling a story of battles fought and survived. His boots crunched against the sand, and his hand rested on the hilt of a plain steel sword at his side. He had no plan to stay here. This place was just another stop in his long, lonely journey. But fate had other plans. From behind the remains of a collapsed building, a small sound caught his ear, soft, almost lost in the wind. It was a voice. Weak. Afraid. He turned his head, scanning the ruins. There, stepping slowly into view, was a little girl. But she was no human. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing under the sunlight. Her long silver-white hair fell around her face like a shining waterfall. Her large, bright eyes were a deep shade of blue that seemed almost endless. She looked fragile, but there was something in her eyes, a spark, a silent plea for help. The warrior stopped walking. His voice was calm but firm. "Who are you?" The girl took another step forward, holding something tightly in her small hands. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "Please?" "Mighty human, my sister was taken." The words hung in the hot air. The warrior's brows furrowed. "Taken? By who?" She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping for a moment before meeting his eyes again. "The raiders. They came last night. They burned our homes. They took her." The man's jaw tightened. Raiders. He had crossed paths with them before, merciless slavers who roamed the wastelands, taking what they wanted and leaving nothing behind. They were dangerous, well-armed, and feared across the desert. The girl stepped closer and held out what she had been carrying. It was a sword, unlike any he had ever seen. Its blade curved slightly, covered in strange glowing symbols. The handle was made of black steel with silver inlays, and it pulsed faintly with a blue light, as if alive. "This was my father's," she whispered. "Before they killed him. He said, if I ever found someone strong, someone with honor, to give it to them." The human hesitated. He had his own battles, his own enemies to fight. Getting involved meant trouble. It always did. But as he looked into the girl's eyes, he saw the truth: she had no one else. "Where did they take her?" he asked. Her lips trembled, but her voice was steady. "To their fortress, far across the desert. I know the way." He took the sword from her small hands. It felt strange, almost warm to the touch. The glowing runes along the blade shifted slightly, as if recognizing its new wielder. "You know it's dangerous," he said. She nodded. "I don't care. She's all I have." The human exhaled slowly, looking at the horizon. The raiders' fortress wasn't just a place, it was a challenge, a death trap for anyone foolish enough to go near. But walking away now? That would haunt him forever. Finally, he looked back at her. "Then we go together." Her eyes widened with hope, and for the first time since he'd seen her, she smiled, just a little. But before they could move, a low rumble echoed in the distance. The ground vibrated slightly. The human turned his head sharply toward the sound. On the far side of the ruins, dust clouds began to rise. Dark shapes appeared against the blinding sun, vehicles. Raider scout bikes, moving fast. "They followed you," the human said, his voice low but tense. The girl's face paled even more. They can't find us. They'll take you too." He gripped the alien sword tightly. "Then let's make sure they don't." The two slipped into the shadows of the ruins, the human moving with the silent precision of a predator. The girl stayed close behind, her small hands clutching her satchel. The rumble of engines grew louder, the dust thicker. He crouched behind a wall and peeked around the corner. 3 raider scouts were coming, their armor patched together from stolen gear, faces hidden behind crude masks. Each carried a weapon across their back. The human's eyes narrowed. If the raiders knew the girl was still alive, they'd hunt her forever. That meant there was only one choice: deal with them now. He looked back at her. Stay here. Don't move. No matter what you hear. She opened her mouth to speak, but he was already gone, slipping through the shadows, the alien sword in his hand glowing faintly like a ghostly flame. The first raider never saw him coming. A swift movement, a flash of blue steel, and the man collapsed without a sound. The second turned, shouting in their rough desert tongue, but the human was faster. The blade cut through the air, striking with deadly precision. The third tried to run. He didn't get far. When it was over, the desert was quiet again. The human walked back to the girl, his armor scratched but his steps steady. He didn't speak, just nodded. She stepped out from hiding, her eyes wide. You're really going to help me?" He looked toward the endless desert. "I said we'd go together. And I keep my word." The sun was sinking lower now, painting the ruins in shades of gold and red. Their journey had just begun. Somewhere far ahead, the raiders' fortress waited, and with it, the fight of their lives. The morning sun rose over the wasteland, turning the sand into waves of gold. Heat shimmered on the horizon, but the human warrior and the small alien girl were already moving. They had to. Every moment wasted was a moment her sister was further away. The human knelt on one knee, studying the ground. His gloved fingers brushed over the dirt, tracing deep grooves left by heavy wheels. The raiders' machines were fast and heavy, built for crossing these deserts without rest. Alongside the tire tracks were boot prints, dozens of them, proof that the slavers had taken more than just her sister. "They're pushing hard," he said quietly, his eyes still on the ground. The girl's small voice broke the silence. "How can you tell?" He pointed to the edges of the tracks. "The sand's still fresh. No wind has covered it yet. They passed here maybe an hour ago." She swallowed hard. "Then we can catch them." He shook his head slowly. "They're faster than us. But speed leaves mistakes. We find those, we find them." They began walking, the human's long strides matching her quick, determined steps. The heat grew worse, the sun beating down without mercy. Sweat ran down the human's neck, and the girl's pale blue skin shimmered faintly in the light. Along the way, the desert began to change. Rocks rose from the sand, jagged and sharp, forming narrow pathways. It was here that the human stopped again. He crouched low, scanning the area, his hand resting on the alien sword strapped to his back. The girl followed his gaze, and froze. In the shadow of a boulder lay a broken helmet, its visor cracked. Next to it, a dark stain had dried into the sand. The human touched the mark with his fingers, frowning. "Blood. Fresh." Her voice trembled. "Is it hers?" He shook his head. "No. Raider blood. Someone fought them here." Before she could ask more, the wind shifted, carrying a faint smell, burned metal. The human stood quickly, motioning for her to stay behind him. They moved forward, careful, silent. Just beyond the rocks, they found the source. A raider scout bike lay on its side, its engine still ticking with heat. The rider was slumped nearby, unmoving, a deep burn across his armor. The man's weapon, a jagged energy rifle, was half buried in the sand. The human's eyes narrowed. Someone else is hunting them. The girl's eyes widened. "Is that good or bad?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he scanned the area, his instincts telling him they weren't alone. He could feel it, the heavy silence, the way the air seemed to hold its breath. Then, a voice came from the rocks above. "Human. Step away from the girl." The human turned slowly, his hand moving toward the alien blade. A tall figure stood on the ridge, wrapped in desert cloth, a rifle aimed directly at him. The man's face was hidden behind a mask, but his stance was steady and dangerous. The girl stepped closer to the human, her small hand gripping the edge of his armor. "Who is that?" she whispered. The masked figure spoke again. The girl is worth a fortune to the raiders. Hand her over, and I might let you live. The human's jaw tightened. Not happening. A long pause hung between them, the wind stirring the sand. Then, the figure lowered the rifle slightly. Then you're a fool, but maybe the kind of fool I can use. The human didn't relax. I'm not here to make deals. The masked man tilted his head. Then we'll see who survives the next mile. The raiders set traps ahead. If you keep walking blind, you'll never reach her sister. The girl looked between them, her eyes full of confusion and fear. Do we trust him? She asked. The human kept his gaze locked on the stranger. Not yet. But the truth was, the stranger's words had weight. Raiders did set traps. And if they were close enough to lay them, then her sister was closer than they thought. The masked man turned away, moving toward a narrow canyon. Follow if you want to live, he called over his shoulder. The human glanced down at the girl. Stay sharp. We're walking into something. Together, they followed the stranger into the canyon, where the light dimmed and the walls seemed to close in. Every step echoed. Somewhere ahead, the faint hum of machinery grew louder. Whatever lay beyond, the human knew one thing: this path was no longer theirs alone. The canyon narrowed until only a single person could pass at a time. The air was cooler here, but heavy, carrying the metallic smell of weapons and the faint stench of sweat. The masked stranger led the way, his movements quick and silent, like someone who had spent years in these rocks. The human warrior followed, his eyes scanning every shadow. The small alien girl stayed close to him, her pale blue skin almost glowing in the dim light. They had been walking for nearly an hour when the stranger suddenly raised his hand, a silent signal to stop. Ahead, the canyon opened into a small plateau. For raider scouts were gathered there, their crude armor patched with metal plates and stolen tech. They sat around a fire, roasting something that looked disturbingly like alien meat. Their rifles lay nearby, but within easy reach. The stranger crouched low. Scouts, he whispered. They'll send a signal if they see us. Then the whole fortress will know we're coming. The human's eyes narrowed. Then we make sure they don't. The girl's hand gripped his arm. Be careful, she whispered. The human set his pack down quietly and reached for the alien sword. The blade shimmered faintly, its runes glowing brighter as if sensing danger. He moved like a shadow, keeping low against the rocks. One raider stood to stretch, his back turned. That was the first mistake. A swift step forward, a flash of blue light, and the raider fell without a sound. The second raider looked up just in time to see the human's eyes before the blade struck. He grabbed for his weapon, but it was too late. The other two jumped to their feet, shouting in a harsh, guttural language. One reached for the comm device on his wrist. The human threw a small metal disc, an EMP charge stolen from the first raider he'd killed earlier. The device sparked and hissed, frying the comms instantly. The last raider pulled out a curved dagger and rushed him. Their blades met with a clang, the alien sword's glow reflecting off the raider's mask. Sparks flew. The human shifted his stance, using the raider's own momentum to twist the blade from his hand. One sharp strike, and the raider collapsed. The plateau was silent again. Only the crackle of the fire remained. The masked stranger stepped out from behind a boulder. Not bad, for a human. The human ignored the remark and scanned the bodies for supplies. He found a set of thermal goggles, 2 water canisters, and a small data chip. The stranger took the chip and slipped it into his belt. The girl approached slowly, her eyes wide as she looked at the fallen raiders. You didn't even give them a chance. The human's voice was calm. They wouldn't have given us one. The stranger crouched near the fire and pointed toward the far side of the plateau. That trail leads straight to the outer watchpost of the fortress. But we'll need to move fast. More scouts will come looking for these 4. The girl looked toward the narrow trail, then back at the human. We're getting closer to my sister, aren't we? He nodded once. Yes. But the closer we get, the more dangerous it will be. The stranger stood and adjusted his rifle. Dangerous is an understatement. The raiders' leader doesn't just guard prisoners, he hunts anyone foolish enough to try and take them back. The human tightened his grip on the alien sword. Then let's make sure we're the hunters, not the hunted. They left the plateau behind, moving quickly along the narrow trail. The wind picked up, carrying distant sounds, metal clanging, engines rumbling. The fortress wasn't far now. But as they rounded a bend, the human stopped cold. In the sand ahead, a long strip of ground was darker, disturbed. He crouched and touched it lightly. "Minefield," he said. The girl's breath caught. "What do we do?" The masked stranger smirked under his cloth. "We dance." And with that, they began picking their way forward, every step a gamble. The fortress was close, but so was death. The canyon trail ended suddenly, spilling them onto a high ridge. Below, the raiders' fortress rose out of the desert like a dark scar against the golden sand. It was built into the side of a massive cliff, half metal, half rock. Rusted towers jutted upward, each armed with mounted guns. Thick black smoke curled from chimneys, and searchlights swept lazily across the wasteland. The human warrior crouched low, studying the defenses. His sharp eyes took in every detail, the guard rotations, the weapon placements, the gates reinforced with steel plates. This wasn't just a camp. It was a fortress built to keep people out, and prisoners in. The girl's breath caught at the sight. "She's in there. I can feel it." The masked stranger crouched beside them. "Good news is, I know a way in." "Bad news?" "It's through the old tunnels, and they're crawling with things that even the raiders avoid." The human didn't flinch. "Show me." The stranger led them along the ridge until they reached a half-buried hatch at the base of the cliff. It was covered in sand and almost invisible from a distance. The metal was corroded, marked with strange alien symbols faded by time. "This is older than the fortress itself," the stranger explained. "A mining shaft from when this place was rich with crystal veins. The raiders sealed most of it off, but this one I've kept for myself." The human pulled the hatch open with a grunt. A stale, cold smell rushed out, carrying the scent of damp stone and rust. The darkness inside was thick, swallowing the light. The girl hesitated. What things are in there?" The stranger gave a small smile beneath his mask. "If we're lucky? Only the worms." The human handed the girl a small lantern from his pack. "Stay close. And if you see anything move, don't touch it." They descended into the tunnel, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the stone. The walls were lined with old machinery, rusted pipes, and rails from long-forgotten mining carts. Every now and then, a drop of water fell from above, splashing in the silence. Halfway through, the girl stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" The human froze, listening. At first, there was nothing. Then, a faint scraping sound from deeper in the dark. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. The stranger raised his rifle. "We're not alone." From the shadows ahead, two glistening shapes emerged. They were long and pale, their skin stretched thin over segmented bodies. Rows of sharp teeth clicked in the dim lantern light. The mining worms. The girl stepped back, fear flashing in her eyes. The human stepped forward instead, raising the alien sword. The runes on the blade pulsed brighter, casting a cold blue glow on the tunnel walls. The first worm lunged, its mouth opening wide. The human moved fast, sidestepping and slashing deep into its side. The blade cut clean, the creature writhing before collapsing with a wet hiss. The second worm circled, its body scraping along the wall. It lunged low, aiming for the girl. The human pivoted, grabbing the worm by its slippery neck and driving the glowing blade straight through its head. The tunnel went silent again, save for the hiss of the dying creatures. The human wiped the blade clean on the sand-covered floor. The stranger gave him a short nod. "You fight like someone who's been here before." The human didn't answer. Instead, he looked ahead, where the tunnel sloped upward. A faint light flickered there, the end of the shaft. They climbed toward it, the air growing warmer with each step. At the top, they emerged into a shadowed chamber built into the cliff itself. Through narrow gaps in the rock, the human could see the inside of the fortress. What he saw made his grip on the sword tighten. Rows of cages lined the yard below, filled with prisoners, human and alien alike. Raiders moved between them, dragging some away while others lay weak in the dirt. The girl's eyes scanned the cages until she froze, pointing with a trembling finger. "Damn, that's her!" Far below, in the last cage near the center, a young alien woman with the same pale blue skin and silver hair sat against the bars, her head bowed. The human's jaw clenched. They were close, too close to turn back now. The stranger glanced at him. "You've got one chance to get her out before the whole place turns on you. Better make it count." The human's eyes never left the cage. "I will." But deep down, he knew, once they stepped inside, there would be no easy way out. The hidden chamber smelled of oil, dust, and something sharper, fear. Below them, the fortress yard was alive with movement. Raiders dragged prisoners from cages, their chains rattling against the stone floor. The clang of metal doors echoed through the air. The human crouched low, eyes locked on the far cage where the girl's sister Saturday. She was thin, her skin dull from exhaustion, but there was no mistake, they shared the same silver hair and bright blue eyes. The girl's voice trembled. "We have to go now." The masked stranger shook his head. "You rush in, you die. The raiders, they like to play with their prey. They'll make you chase her before you can save her." The human's jaw tightened. "Then we don't give them the chance." They moved along the narrow ledge that circled the yard. The light here was dim, the air heavy with smoke from the fortress fires. Every step had to be silent. A single clink of armor could give them away. At the far side of the yard, a service platform jutted from the wall. 2 guards stood there, laughing quietly, their weapons slung carelessly over their shoulders. The human's eyes narrowed. In one swift movement, he was behind them. The alien sword flashed, one guard fell instantly, the other didn't even have time to scream. The human caught his body before it hit the ground, lowering it silently. The girl's eyes were wide, but she said nothing. She was learning, here, hesitation meant death. They slipped down a rusted maintenance ladder, landing in a narrow hallway beneath the yard. The air was colder here, and the only light came from small, flickering lamps. Chains hung from hooks in the walls, some still stained dark. The girl walked close to the human, her voice a whisper. "Why are there chains if they keep the prisoners in cages?" The masked stranger's tone was flat. "Because sometimes, the cages aren't enough." They turned a corner, and froze. A raider stood at the end of the hall, his back to them, rummaging through a crate. But before the human could move, the stranger held up a hand. "Wait, watch." The raider muttered to himself, pulling out a glowing collar. It pulsed faintly with green light, control tech. Whoever wore it would be unable to move without the raider's permission. The human's mind raced. If her sister had one of those, escaping wouldn't be as simple as opening a cage. The raider turned, and that was his last mistake. The human's blade was a blur, and the glowing collar clattered to the floor. The stranger knelt, examining it. "We'll need the override key. Without it, she won't even be able to stand." The girl's hope faltered for a moment, but the human placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get it." They moved deeper into the fortress, weaving through shadows. Somewhere above, voices shouted orders. The ground seemed to tremble slightly with the weight of footsteps, many footsteps. The human's instincts sharpened. Something wasn't right. Raiders were moving too quickly, too purposefully. They weren't patrolling, they were gathering. They turned another corner and found themselves in a wider hallway. At the far end, torchlight spilled from an open doorway. Inside, voices laughed, deep and cruel. The human crept closer, peering inside. A group of raiders sat around a table, tossing credits onto a pile in the center. And on that pile was the override key. The stranger smirked. "Looks like luck's on your side." The human's voice was low. "Luck has nothing to do with it." He stepped into the doorway like a shadow, moving before the raiders even knew he was there. The first one fell with a silent slash. The second barely had time to stand before the blade caught him. One tried to shout, but the stranger's rifle cracked, the sound muffled by a suppressor. It was over in seconds. The key was in the human's hand. The girl's eyes brightened with hope again. "Now we can save her?" But before he could answer, a sound echoed through the hall, a deep, heavy clang, like a massive gate slamming shut. The stranger's eyes narrowed. "They know we're here." And then, from somewhere in the fortress, a voice boomed, cold and mocking. "Human! I've been waiting for you." The girl's hand gripped his arm, her knuckles white. The human looked toward the sound, his grip tightening on the glowing blade. It was no longer just a rescue. It was a challenge. The voice echoed through the stone halls like a drumbeat, deep and filled with a cruel kind of amusement. "Human, bring the little blue one with you. I want her to see what happens when you fight me." The girl froze. Her grip on the human's arm tightened, and her wide eyes darted toward the masked stranger. He didn't speak, he only gave a slow shake of his head, as if to say this is bad. The human's expression stayed calm, but his jaw was tense. "Where is he?" he asked quietly. The stranger pointed toward a long passage lit by flickering red lamps. "That leads to the central pit. If the chief wants you there, that's where he'll be waiting, with the rest of his pack." The girl's voice shook. "We can't go. It's a trap." The human looked at her and spoke evenly. "It's always a trap. The only question is, who walks out alive?" They moved down the corridor, the sound of their footsteps swallowed by the walls. As they walked, the red light grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. The air was hotter now, heavy with the smell of oil, blood, and burning fuel. When they reached the pit, it was exactly what the stranger had promised, an arena. A wide, open circle in the center of the fortress, its floor made of blackened steel. Raiders filled the balconies above, shouting and banging weapons against the rails. At the far end stood the raider chief. He was massive, easily a head taller than the human, his armor thick and scarred, painted with the blood-red symbols of his clan. One side of his face was hidden under a jagged metal mask, the other marked by deep, claw-like scars. In his hands, he held a heavy axe that hummed with a strange, dangerous energy. Behind him, chained to a post, was the girl's sister. Her head was lifted now, her eyes wide as she spotted them. "Sira," she cried, her voice hoarse. The chief smiled, an expression without warmth. "Touching, isn't it? But you'll have to earn her freedom." The human stepped forward into the pit. The alien sword's runes glowed brighter, casting a cold blue light that clashed against the red glow of the arena. The raiders above roared in approval, their voices blending into a thunderous chant. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" The chief pointed the axe at him. "I've killed 20 humans in this pit. You'll be the 21st. But maybe," he glanced at the girl, "I'll keep you alive long enough to watch me sell her." The human didn't react to the insult. He simply shifted his stance, the sword steady in his grip. "You've made 2 mistakes," he said. "First, you took someone who mattered to her. Second, you let me find you." The chief laughed, the sound booming around the pit. "Then let's see what the galaxy's mighty humans can do." He charged first, his heavy boots thundering against the steel floor. The axe came down in a brutal swing, but the human was already moving, stepping aside, the blade slicing toward the chief's exposed arm. Sparks flew as steel met steel. The crowd screamed louder. The girl's sister pulled against her chains, her eyes locked on the fight. The human struck again, aiming for the chief's side, but the massive raider blocked with the axe handle and shoved him back hard. The human slid across the floor, his boots grinding against the steel, but he didn't fall. The chief grinned. "Not bad. Maybe you'll last longer than the others." The human didn't speak. He lunged forward, his blade flashing in quick, precise strikes. The chief blocked most, but not all. A shallow cut appeared on his arm, glowing faintly from the alien blade's energy. The chief's grin faded into a snarl. Above, the raiders' chanting turned into a mix of cheers and angry shouts. The fight had become real now, one wrong move, and it would be over for either side. The girl's heart pounded as she clutched the rail from where she hid in the shadows. This wasn't just a fight, it was the moment that would decide if her sister lived or died. The chief swung again, this time in a sweeping arc meant to cut the human in two. The human ducked low, rolling to the side, and came up with the alien blade aimed at the chief's neck. For a heartbeat, everything went silent until the chief caught the blade in the curve of his axe, locking them together. Sparks rained between them, both warriors pushing with all their strength. The human's voice was low, almost a growl. "This ends now." The chief's eyes gleamed. "You're right, but not the way you think." With a sudden twist, the chief shoved the human back and raised his other hand. Something in his palm glowed, a detonator. Somewhere behind them, metal doors slammed shut, and the walls of the pit began to hum. The trap wasn't just the fight. The entire arena was becoming a death cage. The pit shook as the low hum grew into a deafening roar. From the walls, metal shutters slid open, revealing vents glowing with dangerous heat. The air inside the arena began to shimmer, an incineration trap. The raider chief grinned, his voice booming over the roar. When the walls turn red, the floor melts, and everything inside turns to ash. The crowd above roared in excitement, pounding the rails. The girl clutched the bars from her hiding spot, her breath coming fast. Her sister's eyes darted between the human and the deadly vents, panic rising. The human ignored the heat pressing against his skin. His focus stayed on the chief. "If you wanted to burn me," he said calmly, "you should have lit the fire before I got close." He moved suddenly, faster than the chief expected. The alien sword flashed in a tight arc, forcing the massive raider backward. The runes on the blade blazed bright blue now, humming with raw energy. The chief swung the axe hard, trying to knock the human off balance. Sparks flew as the two weapons clashed again and again, the sound ringing like thunder in the enclosed arena. Above, raiders cheered for blood. But the human was done playing. He feinted left, then drove forward, locking blades with the chief. This time, instead of pushing, he twisted sharply, yanking the axe from the raider's hands. It clattered to the floor, sliding toward the glowing vents. The chief roared in fury and lunged barehanded. The human sidestepped, grabbed the chief's own momentum, and slammed him into the steel floor. The impact shook the pit. Before the raider could recover, the human drove the alien sword into the ground beside him. The glowing runes pulsed once, then unleashed a shockwave of blue light. The vents flickered and died. The hum of the death trap faded into silence. The crowd above gasped, their cheers turning to confusion. The chief tried to rise, but the human pressed the blade against his throat. "You're done." For the first time, the chief's grin was gone. His eyes narrowed, but there was fear in them now. The human pulled the blade back, not to spare him, but to send a message. With one swift movement, he turned and sliced through the chains holding the girl's sister. The alien metal shattered like glass. She stumbled forward into her younger sister's arms. Tears filled both their eyes, but they held each other tightly, as if afraid to let go. The raiders above began shouting, grabbing weapons, but the masked stranger stepped into the pit with his rifle ready. "We're leaving," he growled, covering their escape. The human didn't waste time. He led the sisters out through the maintenance corridors, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Every step was a race against the fortress waking up. They burst into the open desert just as the first shots rang out from the walls. Sand sprayed around them, but they kept running until the fortress was nothing but a dark shape on the horizon. Only then did they stop, gasping for breath under the blazing sun. The girl turned to the human, her voice still trembling. Why would you risk your life for us? You didn't even know us." The human looked out at the desert, the alien sword glowing faintly in his hand. Because no one, human or alien, deserves to be left behind. The stranger gave a low chuckle. You've made enemies today, human. Big ones. The human finally looked at him, a small, dangerous smile on his face. Good. Let them come. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the fortress alarms into the distance. But to the three of them, it was already fading. They had survived. They were free. And somewhere out there, the galaxy had just learned a hard truth. You never take from a human and expect to keep it.